The grand ballroom of the Kensington Hotel in downtown Chicago sparkled under 3,000 crystal lights, and every single one of them had been chosen to make one woman feel small. Garrett Holt stood near the ice sculpture, adjusting his cufflinks, scanning the entrance doors with a grin he could barely contain. Tonight was his and Tiffany's first anniversary celebration. 200 guests, a jazz quartet, and a guest list designed like a weapon. Because somewhere on that list, tucked between business partners and socialites, was the name Simone Delaney, his ex-wife, the woman he had thrown away like yesterday's newspaper, and he wanted her to see exactly what she had lost. Simone didn't know any of this yet. She was sitting on the edge of a twin bed in a studio apartment on the South Side, folding laundry that smelled faintly of the lavender dryer sheets she bought in bulk because they were the cheapest ones at the dollar store. Her daughter Amara was on the floor with a coloring book, tongue poking out the side of her mouth in concentration. Her son Isaiah was stacking plastic cups into a tower beside her. They were 3 years old. They had their father's jaw and their mother's eyes, and they had never once met the man who gave them half their DNA. 3 years ago, Simone Delaney had been married. She'd been 20 pounds heavier with the twins, exhausted, swollen, working double shifts at Mercy General, as a night shift nurse to keep up with the mortgage on the house. Garrett insisted they buy. Garrett was a real estate developer, or at least that's what he called himself. He had a talent for talking big and delivering small, for shaking hands with investors over steak dinners, while his pregnant wife microwaved leftovers alone. And then, one Thursday in March, he came home smelling like a perfume Simone didn't own, sat down at the kitchen table, and told her he'd met someone. Someone better? Someone who understood ambition. Her name was Tiffany Reeves. 26, a lifestyle influencer with 40,000 followers and a jawline that could cut glass. Garrett said the word upgrade, and didn't even flinch when Simone flinched. He said he wanted the divorce finalized before the babies came. He said he didn't want his name associated with struggle. Simone was 7 months pregnant with twins. She signed the papers because her hands were shaking to fight. And because the attorney Garrett hired was more expensive than anything she could afford, and because some part of her, the part that had been shrinking for years under the weight of his indifference, believed him. Believed she was the problem. Believed that if she were thinner or louder or more interesting, he would have stayed. The divorce was final 11 days before the twins were born. Garrett didn't come to the hospital. He didn't call. He didn't send so much as a text message when his 2 children entered the world, screaming and red-faced, in a delivery room where the only person holding Simone's hand was a labor nurse named Jackie, who kept saying, "You're doing amazing, Mama," because there was no one else to say it. He never paid child support. Simone's lawyer, a tired public defender who was handling 40 cases at once, filed the paperwork, but Garrett had structured his income through shell companies and contractor agreements that made his net worth look like pocket change on paper. The court orders came and went. The checks never did. Simone stopped expecting them by the time the twins were 6 months old. She moved into the studio apartment. She worked nights. She found a daycare that operated on a sliding scale. She ate rice and beans 4 nights a week and made sure her children never knew it was because there was nothing else. She braided Amara's hair every Sunday and read Isaiah 3 books before bed every night. Even when she was so tired her vision blurred. She kept going, not because she was strong in the way movies show strength, with a soundtrack and a slow-motion walk, but because the alternative was stopping, and she had 2 people who needed her not to stop. And then the invitation arrived. It came in a cream-colored envelope, heavy stock, gold embossing. Mr. and Mrs. Garrett Holt cordially invite you to celebrate their first wedding anniversary. The Kensington Hotel, black tie. Simone read it twice, then a third time, standing in her kitchen that was also her living room, that was also her bedroom. She almost threw it away, almost. But something about the way her name was written on the envelope, Miss Simone Delaney, with a period after Ms. that felt deliberate, like punctuation designed to remind her she was no longer a Mrs., made her jaw tighten in a way she hadn't felt in years. Garrett wanted her there. That much was obvious. He wanted her to walk in, wearing whatever she could afford, looking however she looked after 3 years of solo parenting, on a nurse's salary, and he wanted to stand next to his new wife and feel like a king. He wanted the contrast, the before and after, the proof that he had chosen correctly. Simone put the invitation on the refrigerator. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because she needed to look at it every day and decide whether she was the kind of woman who would walk into a room designed to humiliate her, or the kind who would stay home. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday night, she made the choice. Not because of anything dramatic, because Amara looked up from her coloring book and said, "Mama, are you sad?" And Simone realized she had been staring at the invitation again, with her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. She looked at her daughter and said, "No, baby. Mama's not sad. Mama's just thinking." She was going. The problem, of course, was everything. She had no dress, no shoes, no money for a sitter, which meant the twins would need to come, which meant she needed outfits for them too. She had $62 in her checking account, and a pride that was held together with duct tape and caffeine. This is where the story shifts. Not with a fairy godmother or a lightning bolt, but with a flat tire on a Wednesday afternoon. Simone was driving home from a 12-hour shift, the twins asleep in their car seats, when the front right tire blew on Lakeshore Drive. She pulled over, hazards on, and stood on the shoulder in her scrubs, staring at the tire like it owed her money. She didn't have a spare. She didn't have roadside assistance. She had a phone at 12% battery and 2 sleeping children in the back. A black sedan pulled over behind her. The man who stepped out was tall, early 50s, with gray at his temples, and the kind of calm that comes from having solved enough problems in life to not panic about a flat tire. His name was Malcolm Ashford, and what Simone did not know, could not have known standing there in her wrinkled scrubs with mascara smudged under one eye, was that Malcolm Ashford was the founder and CEO of Ashford Capital Group, a private equity firm that managed over $3 billion in assets and occupied the top 4 floors of a building she could see from where she was standing. He didn't tell her any of that. He said, "You need a hand?" She said, "I need a whole new car." He laughed. She didn't mean to be funny. He called a tow truck from his phone, then leaned against his car and talked to her while they waited. He asked about the twins. He asked about her shift. He listened in the way that people listen when they actually want to hear the answer, not just wait for their turn to talk. When the tow truck came, he gave her his card and said, "If you need a ride anywhere this week, call me, I mean it." She didn't call. He showed up at the hospital 3 days later with a new tire, already mounted on a rim, and left it at the front desk with a note that said, "For the woman with the flat tire and the 2 most peaceful sleeping kids I've ever seen." His number was at the bottom. Simone called. She told herself it was to say thank you and nothing more. They talked for 45 minutes. He asked about her day. She asked about his. He told her he ran a company. She asked what kind. He said, "The kind that makes me sit in a lot of meetings." She laughed for the first time in longer than she could remember. They talked every night that week. Then the next week. Then Malcolm started showing up with groceries, not making a show of it, just texting her, "I was at the store. You need anything?" and leaving bags on her doorstep with things she hadn't asked for but needed. Whole milk for the twins. Fresh strawberries. The good coffee, the kind that came in a bag instead of a can. A month passed. Then 2. Malcolm met the twins on a Saturday morning at a park. Isaiah handed him a stick and said, "This is a sword." Malcolm took it, knelt down, and said, "I shall defend this kingdom with my life." Amara climbed onto his back without asking permission. Simone watched from a bench and felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd sealed shut with cement and survival. She told him about the invitation on a rainy Thursday while the twins napped. She told him everything. Garrett, the divorce, the word upgrade, the child support that never came, the envelope on the refrigerator. Malcolm listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Do you want to go?" "I don't know." "Do you want to go with me?" She looked at him. He wasn't smiling. He was serious the way he was serious when he talked about things that mattered. "Garrett doesn't know about you," she said. "Good. He thinks I'm still struggling." "Are you?" She considered this. 2 months ago, yes. Today, sitting in her apartment with a man who treated her children like they were made of gold, she wasn't sure anymore. "I want to walk in there," she said slowly. "And I want him to know that he didn't break me." Malcolm nodded. Then we walk in there. He didn't try to buy her a dress. He didn't try to fix it or control it or make it about him. He asked what she wanted to wear, and she said she'd figure it out. He said okay. That was it. Simone's co-worker at the hospital, a woman named Jackie, the same Jackie who had held her hand during labor, happened to have a sister who worked in fashion. The sister pulled a gown from a sample closet. Deep burgundy, off the shoulder, fitted at the waist in a way that made Simone stand straighter when she put it on. It wasn't borrowed glamour, it was armor. Jackie's sister also found matching outfits for the twins. A signature suit for Isaiah, dark navy with a bow tie. A tulle dress for Amara in the same burgundy as her mother's gown. When Simone saw them standing together in Jackie's living room, all three of them dressed and ready, she pressed her hands over her mouth and cried. Not sad tears, the other kind. The night of the anniversary party, Malcolm sent a car. Not a sedan. A limousine. Long, black, polished to a mirror shine. The driver opened the door, and Simone loaded her children inside like it was something she did every weekend. Isaiah pressed his face against the window and said, "Mama, this car is a spaceship." Amara said, "It smells like fancy." Malcolm was waiting at the hotel entrance. He wore a black tuxedo that fit like it had been stitched onto his body because it had been. He looked at Simone and didn't say anything for 3 full seconds. Then he said, "You look like you own the whole damn building," she said. "Don't make me cry. I just did my mascara." They stood at the entrance of the Kensington Hotel ballroom. 200 people on the other side of those doors. Crystal chandeliers. A jazz quartet playing something smooth and expensive. And somewhere in that room, Garrett Holt, who had thrown her away, who had called another woman an upgrade, who had never held his own children, who had structured his finances to avoid feeding them, was waiting for her to shuffle in looking broken. Malcolm took her hand. Amara held her other hand. Isaiah held Malcolm's. 4 people in a line, a family that hadn't existed 6 months ago, standing at the threshold of a room built to make one of them feel worthless. The doors opened, 200 heads turned. The jazz quartet stumbled over a note. Somewhere near the ice sculpture, a champagne flute stopped halfway to someone's lips. Simone Delaney walked in like she had been walking into rooms like this her entire life. Head high, shoulders back, burgundy gown trailing behind her like a whisper. The twins walked beside her, wide-eyed but steady, holding hands with the adults who loved them. And Malcolm Ashford, whose name half the room recognized from business magazines and Forbes features, and the side of a building visible from the highway, walked beside her with the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. Garrett saw her from across the room. The grin that had been living on his face all evening dissolved like sugar in hot water. His champagne glass tilted. Tiffany, standing beside him in a white gown that cost more than Simone's rent, grabbed his arm and whispered something sharp. "Is that her?" Garrett didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Malcolm. He recognized him. Everyone recognized him. Malcolm Ashford wasn't just wealthy. He was the kind of wealthy that made Garrett's real estate ventures look like a child's lemonade stand. The kind of wealthy that didn't need to talk about money, because the money spoke for itself. Simone crossed the room. She didn't rush. She didn't dodge eye contact. She walked directly toward the couple whose anniversary this supposedly was, and the crowd parted for her the way crowds part for people who are not afraid. "Garrett," she said. Her voice was steady, warm even, as if she were greeting an old neighbor she barely remembered. "Congratulations. The venue is beautiful." He couldn't speak. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Tiffany recovered faster. "Simone, wow, you look amazing." Her voice hit every note of fake enthusiasm. "Thank you. These are your children, by the way." Simone glanced down at Isaiah and Amara, in case you were wondering what they look like. The silence that followed was louder than the jazz quartet. 200 people heard it. 200 people did the math. The man celebrating his anniversary with his new wife had never seen his own children. The woman he had invited to Humiliate had arrived looking like she owned the night, on the arm of a man whose net worth made Garrett's look like rounding error. With 2 beautiful children who had his jawline and their mother's unshakable composure. Garrett's face went through several colors. White, then red, then something grayish that looked like it might require medical attention. Tiffany's grip on his arm tightened. The room hummed with whispered conversations that spread like fire through dry grass. But the evening wasn't done, not even close. 20 minutes later, while Garrett was still trying to recover his composure near the bar, the ballroom doors opened again. This time it wasn't a guest. It was two men in suits who moved with the kind of purpose that doesn't care about a dress code. Federal agents. They approached Garrett with the calm efficiency of people who had done this many times before. One of them said his name. The other produced a document. It turned out that Garrett's real estate empire, the one he'd leveraged to impress investors, to fund this party, to build the life he paraded in front of everyone, was built on fraudulent appraisals and forged loan documents. The investigation had been ongoing for 14 months. The timing of the arrest at his own anniversary party, in front of 200 witnesses, was not deliberate. It was simply that the warrant was ready, and federal agents do not wait for convenient moments. Garrett was escorted out through the same doors Simone had entered. He didn't look at anyone as he walked. His hands were at his sides, not in cuffs, not yet, but his posture said everything his mouth couldn't. The jazz quartet kept playing. Nobody stopped them. The music felt absurd and perfect at the same time. Tiffany stood alone in the center of the dance floor, white gown bright under the chandeliers, and for the first time all evening she looked exactly the way Garrett had wanted Simone to look. Small, lost, surrounded by people and completely alone. Simone didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She didn't even watch him leave. She was kneeling by the dessert table, helping Isaiah choose between chocolate cake and strawberry mousse. Amara was holding Malcolm's hand and pointing at the chandelier, asking if the crystals were real diamonds. Malcolm said, "They could be." Amara said, "I think they're ice." Someone approached Simone while she was wiping chocolate from Isaiah's chin. An older woman, elegant, silver-haired, someone who had clearly known Garrett for years. She leaned down and said quietly, "I'm sorry for what he did, and for what we let happen by saying nothing." Simone looked up at her. "You don't need to apologize for him." "No, but someone should." Later that night, after the limousine ride home, after the twins were asleep in their matching outfits, because they had both refused to change, Simone sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the ceiling. Malcolm was in the kitchen, washing dishes that didn't need washing, giving her space the way he always seemed to know how. She thought about the invitation on the refrigerator. She thought about the woman who had stood in this apartment 2 months ago, jaw clenched, $62 in her account, held together by caffeine and stubbornness. That woman had been surviving. Tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Simone felt like she was living. She didn't need the ballroom or the gown or the limousine. She knew that. Those were props in someone else's story. What she needed was what she already had. 2 children who thought plastic cups were towers and car seats were spaceships. A man who showed up with a tire and stayed for the rest. A life that was small and loud and sometimes smelled like lavender dryer sheets from the dollar store, and it was hers. Malcolm appeared in the doorway. "Kids are out cold. Isaiah is still holding a piece of cake. He earned it. You okay?" Simone thought about the question, really thought about it. "Yeah," she said. "I think I am." 3 months later, Garrett Holt pleaded guilty to 12 counts of wire fraud. Tiffany filed for divorce before the sentencing. The court finally enforced the child support order, garnishing his remaining assets. Simone put the money into a savings account for the twins. She didn't touch a dollar of it. On a Sunday morning, while Malcolm made pancakes and Isaiah stood on a step stool to help pour the batter, Amara climbed onto Simone's lap and said, "Mama, are you happy?" Simone looked at the kitchen, at the man flipping pancakes with her son, at the daughter on her lap with flour on her nose. The apartment was small, the furniture was second-hand, the coffee was the good kind now, the bag kind, and there were strawberries in the refrigerator. "Yeah, baby," she said. "Mama's happy." And for the first time in longer than she could measure, it wasn't a lie.